Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving deep into the monumental 80-year legacy of Sierra Leone's preeminent poet and novelist, Syl Cheney Coker. We are going to unpack his life, his profound literary contributions, and really zero in on his masterful poem, The Breast of the Sea. This piece has just been cemented into the West African Examinations Council, or WEX, syllabus for 2026 to 2030. So we're going on a fascinating journey through history, memory, and just some incredibly profound human emotion. Let's get started.
Now, as he recently celebrated his 80th birthday, Cheney Coker published a memoir titled Jollof Boy, and in it, he shares this incredibly poignant reflection. He says, "I have said my piece, and now I lay my pen." It's a quote that really anchors his milestone age, It signals the completion of a lifetime of monumental literary work. He's basically given us everything he has, and now, well, it's our turn to study it.
So here's our roadmap for the Explainer today. We'll start with A Life in Exile, then move to the WEX literature syllabus, followed by an analysis of The Breast of the Sea. After that, we'll unpack A Bloody Century, and finally, we'll wrap up with national memory and legacy.
Section 1. A Life in Exile.
Okay, to truly grasp the weight of his poetry, we absolutely have to understand the intense personal history that serves as its foundation. Born in Freetown, Sierra Leone in 1945, Cheney Coker's life has been, completely defined by movement. In the 1960s, he headed to the U.S. for his studies. But the really crucial period here is from the 70s to the 90s. He spent decades in exile, teaching in the Philippines, living in the U.S., and Nigeria. He was largely fleeing the political violence and the democratic collapse happening back home under Sierra Leone's leader Siaka Stevens. He had to literally watch his homeland fracture from afar. And it actually wasn't until the 2020s that he finally returned to Freetown to retire.
But even before his exile, his childhood shaped him in huge ways. In Jollof Boy, he talks about navigating what he calls two early handicaps in colonial Freetown. First, having a very dark skin tone in a society that was just plagued by extreme colorism. And second, simply being left-handed, which back then was bizarrely seen as a defect. These early, deeply personal feelings of being persecuted, they sparked a profound, lifelong empathy within him for marginalized and oppressed people everywhere.
Which brings us to a really fascinating concept he coined, the Afro-Saxon. So Cheney Coker comes from a Creole background, meaning he's a descendant of repatriated enslaved Africans. He uses Afro-Saxon to describe this sort of cultural hybridity, rootlessness, and what he saw as the mimicry of the Creole middle and upper classes who desperately clung to British customs. Navigating this complex, almost inauthentic societal structure, it essentially forced him on a profound, subterranean journey to find his own authentic voice.
Moving on to Section 2, the WEX literature syllabus.
Now that we have a feel for the man and his roots, let's look at his current academic prestige. If you're a student in West Africa, the West African Examinations Council is definitely familiar to you. Cheney Coker's work isn't just critically acclaimed, it's officially been selected as a core curriculum text for the 2026 to 2030 Literature in English syllabus. That means a whole new generation of minds is about to be analyzing his words.
And this categorization brilliantly illustrates his standing in the literary world. Under African poetry, he shares the curriculum space with heavyweights like Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka and Nii Ozundare. And then, zooming out to the broader curriculum, he sits right alongside global, non-African legends like Lord Byron, Maya Angelou, and Seamus Heaney. He is, without a doubt, a fixed part of the global literary canon.
Section 3. The Breast of the Sea.
All right, let's zoom in on this specific WEX prescribed text and do a bit of a stanza-by-stanza analysis. The absolute crux of this poem is the wild, paradoxical identity of the sea. On one hand, the sea is presented as the nurturing mother, represented by breasts offering consolation and nourishment. But then it shifts drastically. The sea becomes this stark witnessed horror. It's filled with toxins, it's forced to absorb a bloody century, and it's associated with the really grotesque imagery of an anus. It's a shocking contrast for sure, and Cheney Coker uses it to powerfully frame humanity's broken relationship with nature.
Section 4. A Bloody Century.
Let's connect that visceral, dark imagery directly to the actual historical events that inspired it. Listen to these opening lines. After our bloody century, the sea will groan under its weight, somewhere between breasts and anus. Just let that breathe for a second. The 20th century was so saturated with violence that the massive, boundless sea itself is groaning. It's groaning under the physical weight of the corpses and the immense moral weight of our actions.
So, what exactly makes up this bloodied century?
Well, that first stanza is just packed with historical references. We are talking about the millions lost in World War I and World War II. He directly mentions the orphans of East Timor, calling out the brutal imperialism and invasions that nation suffered. And of course, he points to the environmental destruction, the industrial toxins and oil spillage literally choking the waters. The sea has been forced to act as a sponge for the 20th century's violence.
He continues bridging massive historical epics. The sea is only capable of so much history. Noah's monologue, the Middle Passage's cargoes. Here, Cheney Coker is brilliantly connecting biblical antiquity, the Great Flood of Noah, with the very real and very dark chapters of human exploitation in our modern history.
That reference to the Middle Passage's cargoes is absolutely vital to understand. The Middle Passage was the forced, horrific voyage of enslaved Africans across the Atlantic Ocean. It represents an unspeakable death toll, millions of people simply swallowed by the sea. And remember his background here. Freetown itself was established as a home for emancipated slaves. So for the poet, this isn't just abstract history in a textbook. This is deeply personal ancestral trauma.
As we move into the second stanza, the tone shifts from being a historical witness to a deep, profound sense of hopelessness. He writes, "Anything else is only a fractured cella we cannot preserve."
Let's unpack this specific metaphor. The fractured shella. A shella is the pincer-like claw of a crustacean, like a crab. If that claw is broken, the creature can't forage. It literally cannot survive. It is an unhelpable, fatal condition. By calling our history a fractured shella, Cheney Coker is symbolizing humanity's permanent brokenness. It represents the intractable sickness and blight of the 20th century that tragically perhaps just cannot be fixed.
And then, in the final stanza, he turns his gaze homeward with what has to be the most devastating line of the poem. Throbbing, the sea's breasts will console some orphans, but Sierra Leone won't be worth a raped woman's cry.
This incredibly dark verse is a direct, unfiltered critique of his own homeland's suffering, specifically the tragic realities of the Sierra Leone Civil War from 1991 to 2002. He is referencing the political ineptitude, the sheer barbarism, the extreme hardship faced by women and children, and the absolutely horrific utilization of rape as a weapon of war. He's essentially saying his country has been so deeply traumatized, so ripped apart, that it feels beyond even the vast consolation of the sea.
Finally, Section 5, National Memory and Legacy. Let's step back for a moment and summarize. When you look at Cheney Coker's work, especially the material chosen for the wax syllabus, these are the core themes you're going to encounter. The sheer devastation of war and conflict, the grim reality of environmental degradation, that complex intersection where nature meets human cruelty, the lingering, painful scars of slavery and colonization, and an undeniable sense of the futility of human endeavors. He uses his poetry not just as art, but as a crucial living document of our collective trauma and national memory.
He actually closes the poem by addressing the sea directly, asking, "But do you, O sea, long-suffering mistress, have the balm to heal the wound of her children?" It's a plea, sure, but it is heavily loaded with his lingering pessimism about humanity's future. He's asking if nature can genuinely fix what humanity has so thoroughly destroyed.
Which leaves us with this final, profound question to ponder today. Does the sea, does nature, or even does literature truly have the balm to heal the deep, dark wounds of our history? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I'll see you next time.